Everybody, Pastor John here. Today we're continuing our study of end times. The goal of this study is to discuss things that are outside of the book of Revelation, things that are important to the discussion, but as we read through and study through the book of Revelation, we're not going to find them. And so, remind you, October 2nd, which is next week, next Thursday, we will be doing an in-person study of studying through the book of Revelation. We're going to go through the whole book. First Thursday of every month, we will be having a study going through the book of Revelation. Now, this week, we were going to do the tribulation. I said last week that because so much of the rapture talk was about the tribulation, so I said this week we would be doing a video on that. But I decided not to. One, because the tribulation topic is actually, I'm probably going to spend 2 to 3 videos on that one, going through Matthew 24, the Olivet Discourse, Daniel chapter 9, and explaining the different views of the tribulation from those passages. So I wanted to give more time because next week we won't be having a video because we will be in person. So I'm not doing a video next week. And so, but this week, what I wanted to focus in on was the history of the end times. So we tend to believe as Christians that the view that we have right now, or the predominant view in Christianity, which is dispensational premillennialism, that was the view throughout all of church history, and that's just not the case. There has been many different views throughout church history, but there has been 4 prominent ones, and these 4 prominent ones we're going to be looking at. We're looking at each of these as we read through the book of Revelation and interpreting Revelation through these 4 views, which is historic premillennialism, amillennialism, postmillennialism, and dispensational premillennialism. And so we tend to believe is, like I said, that our view has always been the view. And like, for instance, the rapture was supposed to happen yesterday, right? Some believe that. It didn't happen. And as we see throughout history, there has been certain times where people have done the same thing. They've done a lot of casting dates and saying, this is going to be the rapture. But that's not the view of all Christians, and that's not the view of all Christians throughout church history. And so I think it's important to understand that because we believe this now doesn't mean that the church has always believed this. And church history, I think, is important to look back on and say, well, what did they believe 2,000 years ago or 1,000 years ago? Because it does change. So let's go through church history. What has been the predominant views throughout church history? And each 4 of these views have had their peak moments. Some lasted more than others, and I think for different reasons, some lasted more than others. But each of them has had their moment where the majority of the church believed in a certain view. So the first one, we go all the way back to the beginning of the church, from 33 AD, 40 AD, you could say, to about 300 AD. You had the predominant view was historic premillennialism. Historic premillennialism is very similar to what the predominant view is today of dispensational premillennialism. The big difference is the rapture. They believe in, as we remember last week, they believe in a post-trib rapture, a pre-wrath rapture. They believe in that. So they believe that the rapture is going to happen at the very end of it all. Jesus returns and he takes his church up at the same moment as he's coming down, like same moment. So there's not a pre-trib rapture. So that's historic premillennialism. And historic because it's the oldest view of premillennialism. But the millennium reign, they believe the same thing. Jesus is going to reign for 1,000 years on earth. Same thing as dispensational premillennialism. This lasted about from, like I said, from the beginning of the church to about 300 to 400 AD. In all this, I will say this as well. There was other views, but this was the predominant one, just as there is now. There's other views of end times, but the predominant view is dispensational premillennialism. But there are other Christians that have other views in this time period. So this lasted about 300 to about 400 AD. Why did the view change? What happened? The church became, a couple of things happened. The church became predominantly Gentile, and with premillennialism, there's a very big emphasis on Jerusalem, and the church in that day did not see Jerusalem as anything relevant anymore. At this point in time, especially 400 AD, Jerusalem was in rubble. Rome sacked Jerusalem in 70 AD, so it was literally just a pile of rocks. And Rome at this point was the epicenter of the church. So many Christians question, well, why is Jerusalem of any relevance anymore? Is Jerusalem really the future? Is Jesus really going to reign in physically in Jerusalem, or will it be in Rome? And they also started questioning things like, is the world really getting worse? Premillennialist view is that the world is going to get worse and worse and worse. They started questioning, is the world really getting worse? It seems like it actually was, at this point in time, especially 300 AD, that's when Constantine became the emperor, and Christianity became the religion of the Roman Empire. It seemed like things were getting better, not worse, right? So you could try to, were things really getting worse? And they started questioning, is Christ really coming soon? Like, some people started doing some date setting and other thing in this time, which really kind of lost they lost the credibility from much of the church. And also around this time, a very well-known figure started to rise up, somebody that some of us probably even still read his books. Around 390 AD, a man by the name of Augustine, he started to spread the view that became very, very popular in the church, and actually had this view had the longest reign of any of the views in the church, which is Amillennialism. So St. Augustine spread the view of Amillennialism around the church. Basically, the idea of Amillennialism, once again, we're going to look more into this on October 2nd of all these views, but simply it's they still believe the same thing, that the world is going to get increasingly worse, but they believe the millennium reign is right now. It's not a future thing. The millennium reign is symbolic. It's not actually a literal 1,000 years. We're in the millennium reign right now, where Jesus is reigning as King and Lord from heaven and not on earth. They do believe Jesus is going to return to earth, but they believe that he's reigning right now as King. Once again, we'll talk more of this October 2nd. This Amillennialism belief was the predominant view of the Catholic Church until the 1700s. So I said that this view, Amillennialism, lasted a very long time. Amillennialism was such a predominant view that if any other view came up, for instance, historic premillennialism, if that was so uncommon in this time that in the Middle Ages, people thought if you were premillennialist, you were actually a heretic. So this is how much Amillennialism captivated the theology of this time, and all of eschatology was believed to be Amillennialism. Now, I'll say this also: just because it was the longest view that held it's the view that held on to the longest, does not mean that it was correct. You have to remember the culture of this time. This was the height of the Catholic Church. This is the time where Bibles are not available to most people. They were not in the common language of the day. The masses, Catholic Mass, was not spoken in the common language of the people. And you, at this time, you did not go against the Catholic Church. So the Catholic Church held the view of Amillennialism. You held the view of Amillennialism. We saw what happened when a Catholic went against the church. Martin Luther, right? We're coming up on Reformation Day, October 31st. Like, we saw what happened when he went against the Catholic Church, and we saw what happened. So just because it was the longest view does not mean it was the correct one, right? Or it's the one that you need to believe in, because for 1,400 years that was the predominant view of the church. It's just because that was the height of the Catholic Church, and you did not go against the Catholic Church in this time. Now, but during the 1700s, right after the Reformation, and people were wrestling. There's different thoughts that have come out, and Protestantism started to rise during this. So around the 1700s, there was another major shift in the eschatological view. And this is the time where post-millennialism became a very popular view of the church, and some amazing things happened out of this time. So basically what happened, post-millennialism believed is a very optimistic view, which the other ones are very pessimistic. The world's going to go to hell in a handbasket. That's kind of the view. Post-millennialists is the total opposite. They believe the world's going to get better and better and better. So the church is going to basically, like I said before, they're going to conquer the world through peaceful means, but the world will become Christian. The Holy Spirit is going to grow the church to literally take over the world, right? They're going to make disciples of the entire world. Very optimistic view. Now, this became a very popular view from the 1700s right up until like World War I, and we'll get into that, why that shifted. And you probably can think why that shifted with an optimistic view. But this became very popular. Daniel Whitby, 1700s, wrote his theological view of postmillennialism. Then it was the evangelist, some of us might know, Jonathan Edwards, that then spread this view to the masses. And it's also during the time that Jonathan Edwards was one of the main leaders during the First Great Awakening, and most of those evangelists were postmillennialists. Even the Puritans coming over to the New World were postmillennialists. They believed coming over to the New World, this was the new world. This is the world. This is this is going to be God's light to the world. It's going to spread and go. And so they had really great views. And also during this time, during the 1800s into the early 1900s, this is the time of the great missionary movement. So you had many missionaries going out to many different corners of the world and spreading the gospel, and much of the missionary some if you go back even like South Korea and other places, even in some places of Africa, like you can tie back their when they started believing in Christ was right around the time of the 1800s, and this was because of this great movement going out. So, but what happened is that some started criticizing this movement. What happened is that some started saying they became too liberal, and they started focusing more on social reform instead of on the gospel, because they believed that the culture the culture you become more Christian, but as the culture became more Christian, they started becoming more relaxed. And so there was some debate on whether or not this was a good thing. And by the time World War I came around, and it's definitely into World War II, people started to really rethink postmillennialism as they saw the chaos break out into the world, literally two world wars breaking out. People started to question, is the world really getting better or is it getting worse? And at this time, there was a new view that started to come out or started to resurface, but with a new, different emphasis. This new view was premillennialism, but a certain category of premillennialism, which was dispensational premillennialism. There was a Texas preacher by the name of Cyrus Scofield who started preaching this eschatological view of dispensational premillennialism, which focuses heavily on God's promises to Israel, and once again, the world increasingly getting worse over time. This view is cemented very much in Israel, and when Israel, right after World War II, this is why this view became even more popular in Christianity, because right after World War II, as we know, Israel became a country, a sovereign nation, and that many saw as a prophecy fulfilled. And so because of that, dispensational premillennialism became a very popular view of the church. And even to this day, most of you are probably dispensational premillennialists, and because that's what you grew up with. I mean, I grew up with that as well. That was the view that, I'm not saying it's wrong, I'm just saying that's the view that everyone really kind of has. And we very rarely look into these other views that were very popular in church history, and we see a lot of fruit from some of them throughout church history. So those are the four views throughout church history. We see them, not like I said, all these views most of these views were always there throughout church history, but these views that you can kind of see throughout church history, they peaked and they had their high moment. So I would ask you this, just to end this video. What is your view, right? And what is your view of eschatology? I'd love to just get this discussion going. We will be continuing on October 2nd, talking more about the different views and of the end times. And also, do you notice right now, I'd even ask, do you notice a shift in the eschatological view in the church today? Do you notice that we're shifting or moving towards a different end time view more than others? And which do you think, do you think that another one's going to rise up, or do you think that this dispensational premillennialism is the one that's going to be the only view until the rapture happens, or Christ returns, whichever one happens first, or at the same time they happen, right? So anyways, let me know, comments. I would love to hear more of people's thoughts about this, and I look forward to October 2nd at 5:30. There will be a potluck first, 6 o'clock. 6-ish we'll start our study, so come out to that. I'm really excited to dive into this deeper in person. We can ask more questions, have more dialogue around this. And yeah, so thank you. See you guys next week.